This is actually one of the craziest stories I've ever heard, and it revolves around two pitchers from the 1973 New York Yankees. You do not need to be a sports fan in order to have fun with this one, so please come along for the ride. Let's get right into it. From 1965 to 1972, the New York Yankees were owned by CBS, like the TV channel, and they struggled mightily during those years. But on January 3rd, 1973, the team was purchased by a group of investors led by a man named George Steinbrenner. Now, Steinbrenner's main goal was to win. The Yankees hadn't won a World Series in over a decade, and while that might not seem crazy for other baseball teams, the Yankees had a long history of winning championships, so he wanted to bring that back to New York. Steinbrenner was strict, he was calculating, a real no-nonsense kind of guy. Now, in order to be successful, it would help if he knew the team, right? So he would meet the coaches, he would meet the players, and two of those players, two starting pitchers for him, would be Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich. Fritz Peterson was one of the better pitchers in baseball. He had been voted into the All-Star game just a few seasons back, and just the previous season, he had been among the league leaders in several pitching categories. In fact, a quick stat for the baseball nerds in the house, he still has the lowest base on balls per innings pitched by a left-handed pitcher since the 1920s. Mike Kekich, on the other hand, had a history of bouncing around the league a little bit. He had a career-best 10 wins the previous season, which is right around the league average, whereas Fritz Peterson had finished the previous season with 17 wins. Now, it was pretty well known, these two players were good friends. They were travel roommates, meaning when they traveled for away games or for spring training, they would share hotel rooms together. They also lived close enough to each other in New Jersey where their family could become good friends too. They both had a wife, they both had two children, ages 5 and 2, and both of them had a family dog. So a few months after George Steinbrenner acquires the team, it's spring training. This is like the month right before the baseball season actually begins. And these two players want to make some sort of public announcement in separate press conferences. Now, this is very strange. Athletes usually hate talking to the media unless they're being forced to.
I'm here so I won't get fined.
So what the heck were they going to be announcing at these press conferences? People had no clue. The sports writers filed into the media room and they took their seats and they waited for these players to arrive, although these were separate press conferences. And I don't know which one went first, so let's just say hypothetically that it was Fritz Peterson. Fritz Peterson calmly walks into that press conference, steps up to the microphone, and addresses the media. Hey everybody, I'm glad you could all make it. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I did want you to hear these words directly from me. You all know that I'm married to my wonderful wife, Marilyn. However, over the last few months, it seems that she has fallen in love with another man, and she would like to be married to that man instead. That man is my teammate, Mike Kekich. Weird press conference, right? But what's even weirder is Mike Kekich said at his press conference that his wife, Suzanne, wanted to marry Fritz Peterson. So each of these starting pitchers stepped up to their respective microphones and announced publicly that they were going to be trading wives and their families for good. I'm sorry. What? Fritz Peterson was going to be moving into Mike Kekich's house, and Mike Kekich was going to be moving into Fritz Peterson's house. They agreed that they would be trading wives and children and dogs. Not the dogs! Whatever happened to man's best friend? Okay, we need to understand how this happened, so let's rewind a little bit. In the summer of 1972, New York Post writer Maury Allen was having a barbecue at his house and invited Fritz Peterson and his wife Marilyn to come over. Now, the Yankees weren't playing that day, so Fritz asked Maury, hey, do you mind if I invite Mike and his wife Suzanne also? Maury had no problem with this, so both couples came over for the barbecue, they mingled with the other guests, and they had a great time. Now, while the barbecue is dying down, both the Petersons and Kekiches are still having a good time, and they look at each other and say, you want to keep the party going? So they agreed to go to the Red Oak Diner in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Now, they had each driven separately to the barbecue, so Mike had shown up with his wife Suzanne, and Fritz had shown up with his wife Marilyn. But on the way to the diner, they said, you know what might be fun? Let's do a little switcheroo. So, Mike's wife Suzanne was traveling with Fritz, and Fritz's wife Marilyn was going to travel with Mike. These would be their respective partners on the way to the diner. The implication here is that each of these couples may have had an open marriage. An open marriage is a relationship between married partners where there's an agreement that either person is allowed to have a physical relationship with another person. With the introduction of contraceptives in the 1960s, this wasn't as uncommon as you may think. Fritz Peterson and Suzanne Kekich were the first to arrive at the diner. So they got a table, they had a seat, maybe a little bit of light flirting, maybe split an order of mozzarella sticks. Enough time passed by where Fritz and Suzanne are saying, all right, what's taking them so long? But we all know, right? A little Yankee-panky, perhaps?
2 hours later.
Mike and Marilyn finally show up to the diner together, probably a little sweaty, but Suzanne and Fritz, they have no problem with this. In fact, they say, you guys want to do this again sometime? And they would. They would do it again and again and again. Enough time passed by where the couple said, what are we even doing? Are we just happier this way? So in the fall of 1972, which is months before these press conferences, they agreed to switch houses. Mike Kekich packed a bag and moved into Fritz Peterson's house, and Fritz Peterson packed a bag and moved into Mike Kekich's house. They wanted to be clear, this was not a wife swap, this was a life swap. They were trading houses, possessions, children, and dogs. Again, dogs, where's the loyalty? Fritz and Marilyn had had 2 sons together who were both ages 5 and 2, and Mike and Suzanne had had 2 daughters together, also both ages 5 and 2. They thought that in order for this to work, the children had to stay with their mothers. The pitchers went to their general manager, Lee MacPhail, which is a horrible name for the GM, by the way, and their manager, Ralph Houck, and requested that neither of the 2 players be traded. That way they could stay a part of their families' lives, specifically their birth children. MacPhail and Houck agreed to make this work, although MacPhail did make a joke that they may have to cancel Family Day this year. The GM and manager both had the players' backs, saying you only get to go through life one time, so why go through it unhappy? New team owner George Steinbrenner was livid. He had just purchased the team and felt like he was walking into a circus act. But the thing that was most important to him was winning. So if the team could win, maybe he'd be able to look past this. A famous psychologist named Dr. Joyce Brothers made a prediction after this press conference, stating that one of these couples would work out and the other one would fail. And she was right. Fritz Peterson and Suzanne Kekich, the ones who didn't immediately get down and dirty after the barbecue, they are still married to this day. In fact, they had 4 kids of their own together. However, Mike Kekich and Marilyn Peterson split up after just a few months. They tried an on-again, off-again kind of relationship for a little while, but it just wasn't working. And so eventually, Marilyn took her kids and left. So Mike was left all alone, dogless. Mike fell into a depressive state, and it definitely did not help his baseball stats. He started 5 games for the Yankees, and they said, you know what? He's not married to Fritz's wife anymore. Let's trade him. So he got traded to the Cleveland Indians. Mike eventually remarried and had a kid after retiring from baseball, and currently lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Fritz Peterson has said he has no ill feelings towards his former teammate, and assumes the same from Mike Kekich. But years earlier, Kekich had made a statement to the Miami News saying, somewhere inside, I'd like to kill him. No word on if that was a joke or not. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, this is crazy enough to be a movie, guess what? It almost was. Hollywood stars Matt Damon and Ben Affleck tried to make it happen. However, Mike Kekich was still very bitter about this and was not interested in being a part of the production at all. I imagine those Boston boys probably would have a problem putting on a Yankee hat as well. Now, in the sports world, we love a good trade and analyzing the heck out of a trade. So let's determine the winners and the losers of this trade, shall we? In the winners column, we have Fritz Peterson, Suzanne Kekich, and whoever the therapists were for both of these couples' children. I'm sure they made plenty of money. In the losers column, we have Mike Kekich, George Steinbrenner, the dogs, Ben Affleck, and of course,
Matt Damon.
So that's going to do it, folks. What do you think? What's the craziest sports story that you know about? Why don't you drop it in the comments? Make sure you like, subscribe, and until next time, deuces, kids.